The house was unusually quiet that evening, too quiet for Emma's liking. She sank into the worn armchair by the window, clutching a mug of tea that had long gone cold. Outside, the soft drizzle painted the world in muted shades of gray, and the rhythmic tapping of rain against the glass felt almost like a heartbeat steady. Lonely and insistent, her husband, Daniel, had left early that morning for a week-long business trip. And for the first time in years, Emma felt the full weight of the emptiness he left behind. Their home usually filled with laughter, the sound of his footsteps, and the little notes he'd leave for her on the kitchen counter now seemed to echo with silence. Every corner held a memory, every room whispered reminders of a life she shared with him. And now she was left to face it alone. Emma stared at the window pane, tracing the patterns the rain made as it slid down. She could almost see Daniel's reflection in the glass, smiling at her with that warm, reassuring grin she had come to rely on. A sigh escaped her lips, a sound too soft to reach anyone else, yet heavy with longing. She hadn't realized how much she leaned on his presence until it was gone, even temporarily. Trying to distract herself, Emma picked up a book from the side table. But the words seemed blurry, meaningless. She turned on the radio, hoping the soft classical music would fill the silence. But it only highlighted how still the house felt. Even the clock ticking on the wall seemed louder than usual, each second stretching into a minute, each minute stretching into an eternity. She wrapped her hands around the mug, trying to force warmth into herself, not just her fingers. Her mind wandered back to the morning Daniel had left. She had waved goodbye at the door, smiling bravely as he disappeared down the driveway, suitcase in hand. "I'll be back before you know it," he had said, brushing a stray strand of hair from her face. She remembered the way he had paused for a second, just long enough for her to see the little flicker of worry in his eyes. Even then, she had laughed it off, telling herself she would be fine. But now, hours later, the laughter felt distant and hollow. She missed the way his presence made even ordinary moments, making breakfast, folding laundry, watering plants, feel meaningful. She missed the quiet conversations they shared in the evenings, the gentle teasing over coffee, the way he always remembered exactly how she liked her tea. And most of all, she missed the comfort of knowing that someone cared enough to be there, even when nothing exciting was happening. The loneliness pressed against her chest like a heavy weight, making her heartbeat uneven. Emma closed her eyes and tried to imagine Daniel walking back through the door, suitcase behind him, his face lighting up when he saw her. She pictured their reunion in her Minda, simple, quiet moment of connection. Yet it made her eyes water with longing. She hadn't realized how much she needed him, not just for love, but for the sense of home he brought into every corner of her life. A sudden sound broke her reverie, a soft knock at the door. Emma's heart skipped a beat. Visitors at this hour were unusual. She set down the mug, wiped her hands nervously on her lap, and walked toward the door. She hesitated, a mix of curiosity and caution keeping her fingers on the handle. Who could it be? She whispered to herself. Opening the door slowly, Emma found no one at first. Then her eyes caught movement, a shadow flickering across the porch in the dim light. She stepped outside, peering into the rain-soaked evening, but the only sound was the rain itself. Her heart slowed slightly, though a curious warmth filled her chest. Even in her solitude, life had a way of sneaking up on her, reminding her that she wasn't completely alone. She turned back toward the house, closing the door softly, and leaned against it for a moment. Maybe it was just her imagination, the mind playing tricks when she was lonely. Maybe the universe was testing her patience, seeing how she would cope with absence. Or perhaps it was about to teach her something unexpected. Emma sighed and walked back to the window, settling into her chair once more. She gazed outside as the rain shimmered under the soft glow of the streetlight. The world seemed both distant and intimate all at once, a reflection of the emptiness and hope she felt inside. She realized that loneliness wasn't just a lack of company, it was a space where longing, reflection, and quiet strength could grow. And somewhere deep inside, Emma knew that this week would not just test her heart, but also reveal something she hadn't noticed before, something about herself, about Daniel, and about the invisible threads that bound their lives together. The rain continued to fall, the house remained quiet, and Emma held on to a fragile hope that life had a way of surprising even the most solitary hearts. Sat back in her armchair, the rain now a gentle patter against the roof, and let her mind wander to the past. She closed her eyes and remembered the first time she and Daniel had met. Years ago, on a crisp autumn morning at a small cafe in the city. She had been rushing to a meeting, her mind tangled with deadlines, while he had been patiently reading a book at a corner table. When their eyes met, it had been a fleeting moment, a simple smile shared across the room. But it had lingered in her mind for weeks. Daniel had a way of making ordinary moments feel extraordinary. She remembered the first time they had cooked together, laughing at their clumsy attempts to chop vegetables in perfect synchrony. He had accidentally spilled tomato sauce on the counter, and they had laughed until tears ran down their cheeks. It was in those small, imperfect moments that Emma realized something profound. Daniel wasn't just someone she loved. He was someone who made life brighter simply by being there. Her thoughts drifted to quiet evenings spent at home, curled up on the sofa with blankets and books, sharing stories, dreams, and unspoken fears. Daniel had always listened, not just hearing her words, but understanding the spaces in between, the emotions she sometimes couldn't voice. He had a gentle way of making her feel seen and understood, even when the world outside felt overwhelming. Emma remembered the time they had gone on a spontaneous weekend trip to the mountains. They had driven for hours, windows down, music playing softly, and shared laughter that echoed across the winding roads. She could still picture the way his eyes lit up when he spotted a deer crossing the path ahead, or how he had held her hand as they walked along the misty trails. Those were the moments when their bond had solidified, not through grand gestures, but through shared experiences that quietly stitched their lives together. But even in these cherished memories, there had been moments of distance, subtle but undeniable. Work, family obligations, and life's unpredictability had occasionally kept them apart. Emma remembered nights when Daniel had to stay late at the office, or times when she had felt lonely despite being together in the same house. It wasn't a lack of love, it was simply the challenges of life. The little separations that tested patience and resilience, yet, somehow, those challenges had only made their bond stronger. Each absence, each small disappointment, had reminded them of what they truly valued in each other. Emma realized that longing had become a part of their love story. Missing Daniel had taught her to appreciate his presence in a deeper, more heartfelt way. She had learned that love wasn't just about constant proximity, it was about understanding, trust, and the quiet knowledge that someone cared deeply for you, even when miles apart. The rain continued its soft rhythm outside, and Emma allowed herself a small smile. She thought of the letters and little notes Daniel often left for her, hidden in drawers or tucked into her books. Each one carried his warmth and thoughtfulness, a tangible reminder of the connection they shared. Even the simplest messages, "thinking of you," "can't wait to see you tonight," had a way of lifting her spirits on lonely days. She picked up a small photo from the side table, a picture of the two of them laughing under a tree during one of their early trips together. Daniel's smile was bright and full of life, and she could almost hear his voice in her memory, telling a silly joke that made her laugh until her sides ached. Emma held the photo close, letting the nostalgia wash over her. These moments, she realized, were the threads that held them together, stronger than distance or time. Emma also reflected on the quiet, unspoken feelings that had shaped their relationship. There had been times when words weren't enough, when a glance or a gentle touch conveyed what language could not. She remembered moments of vulnerability, when they shared their fears and insecurities without hesitation, trusting each other completely. It was in those moments that she felt the depth of their love, most profoundly a love built, not on grand declarations, but on shared understanding and unwavering support. Yet, despite the closeness they shared, Emma couldn't ignore the subtle ache that sometimes lingered. Life's pressures had occasionally forced them apart, and the thought of being alone without him now brought a fresh wave of longing. She realized that the separation this week wasn't just about physical distance. was a reminder of how intertwined their lives had become, and how deeply she missed his presence in ways she hadn't fully acknowledged until now. Emma let out a soft sigh and leaned back into the chair, eyes tracing the raindrops on the window once more. The memories, both joyful and bittersweet, had filled her heart with warmth, even as they highlighted her current loneliness. She understood now that love was not just about being together in every moment. The next morning, the rain had slowed to a soft drizzle, leaving the garden sparkling with droplets that caught the sunlight. Emma sat at the kitchen table, absent-mindedly stirring her tea, when a sudden sound made her start a soft thump at the back door. Her heart skipped a beat. She wasn't expecting anyone, and the thought of an unannounced visitor sent a flutter of curiosity through her. Carefully, she set down her cup and walked across the kitchen, the wooden floor creaking beneath her steps. Peering through the glass, she saw nothing at first, just the wet garden glistening under the muted morning light. But then, out of the corner of her eye, she noticed a small paper bag sitting neatly on the doorstep. Emma opened the door and picked it up. Inside was a single envelope, neatly folded, with Daniel's familiar handwriting. Her fingers trembled slightly as she unfolded it. The note read, "I know being apart is never easy. I saw something today that reminded me of you, and I couldn't wait to share it." Curiosity piqued. Emma looked around, wondering what Daniel could possibly be referring to. There was no message beyond that, just a simple, quiet statement that made her heart swell with emotion. Even in his absence, he had found a way to reach her, to remind her of their connection. Her mind wandered back to earlier times, to the moments when small gestures had spoken louder than words. A shared coffee, a note tucked into a book, a bouquet of flowers left on the kitchen table. Daniel had always known how to make ordinary days extraordinary, and now, even from afar, he had done it again. Emma carefully placed the envelope on the counter and looked out the window at the garden. The sunlight caught on the raindrops, turning them into tiny prisms that danced in the soft morning light. It reminded her of a memory from years ago, when she and Daniel had spent a morning in this very garden, planting flowers together. They had laughed at the muddy soil, at the way the rain had caught them by surprise, and at how hopelessly tangled the plants had become under their clumsy care. And then, just as she was lost in that memory, Emma noticed a familiar figure walking down the street. She blinked in disbelief. It couldn't be, could it? The man's stride, the way he carried himself, it was unmistakably Daniel. But how could he be back already? He wasn't scheduled to return for several more days. Emma's heart raced as she rushed to the door. Her mind raced with questions, hope, and a sudden, thrilling disbelief. As Daniel stepped closer, she noticed a small bundle in his hands. He looked just as she remembered, calm, warm, and somehow more present than she had ever felt him through a phone call or text. "Emma," he said softly, a smile tugging at the corners of his lips. "I thought I'd surprise you." Emma felt a rush of emotions, relief, joy, disbelief, and a wave of tenderness she hadn't realized had been building over the week. She wanted to speak, to tell him how much she had missed him, but the words caught in her throat. Instead, she simply ran toward him, letting herself be enveloped in the quiet intensity of the moment. Daniel set down the bundle, a small, potted flower that had clearly been chosen with care, took her hands in his. "I saw this and thought of you," he said. "It reminded me of our mornings in the garden, of all the little moments that make life so ours." Emma smiled through the tears that had gathered in her eyes. The flower was simple, unassuming, yet it carried with it a depth of meaning that words alone could never express. It was a reminder of shared memories, of the bond that had grown stronger with time, and of the love that endured even in separation. They stood together, hand in hand, silently acknowledging the weight of the past week. The small twist of fate, a simple flower, a timely note, and an unexpected early return had reignited the emotions that had always simmered beneath the surface. It wasn't a grand, dramatic gesture that brought them together, but the quiet, thoughtful acts that had always defined their love. Emma realized that these moments, the unexpected, tender gestures, were what made their connection so profound. Even in absence, even in uncertainty, they found ways to reach each other, to remind each other that love wasn't measured by hours or miles, but by the thoughtfulness and care woven into everyday life. As they walked back into the house together, the sunlight spilling across the floor and illuminating the room in a warm glow, Emma felt her heart lighten. The quiet twist of the morning had reminded her that love was alive, even in the small surprises, the fleeting gestures, and the moments that caught them off guard. And as Daniel looked at her with that familiar, unwavering warmth, she knew that the week apart had not weakened their bond and had deepened it, revealing the strength, tenderness, and resilience that had always defined their connection. Even in ordinary, everyday life, love had a way of finding its way back to them, just when they needed it most. The evening settled gently over the house, painting the rooms in shades of amber and gold as the sun dipped behind the horizon. Emma and Daniel sat together on the living room couch, the potted flower resting on the coffee table between them. Its tiny blooms seemed to mirror the warmth that had begun to return to Emma's heart, but beneath the calm surface, unspoken emotions hovered like quiet shadows. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Daniel's hand rested lightly on the back of the couch near hers, a simple gesture that carried a weight far greater than words. Emma felt her chest tighten with longing, the kind that had quietly built over the past week of separation. She wanted to tell him everything she had felt, the ache of the empty house, the loneliness that had pressed on her, the small joys she had clung to in the hope of seeing him again. Yet the words remained lodged in her throat. There was something fragile about this reunion, a delicate balance between joy and fear. What if the week apart had changed something in him? What if her emotions seemed too much after days of absence? These thoughts tugged at her heart, making her hesitate, even though she longed for nothing more than to share herself fully with him. Daniel, too, seemed lost in thought. Emma noticed the subtle tension in his shoulders, the way his eyes lingered on hers for a fraction longer than necessary before darting away. He had always been careful with words, preferring action over speech. But she knew that behind his calm exterior, emotions were stirring quiet, profound feelings that he hadn't yet voiced. "You've been thinking a lot," Emma said softly, her voice breaking the silence. She didn't mean to confront him, but the simple truth of her observation hung in the air, gentle yet pointed. Daniel gave a small, almost embarrassed smile. "I have," he admitted. "I think. Sometimes I don't say everything I feel. I worry that I might disrupt the quiet, the comfort we have. But being away these past days, it made me realize how much I take for granted even the simplest things about us." Emma's heart fluttered. She had expected him to speak, yes, but the depth in his voice, the honesty in his eyes, caught her by surprise. She wanted to reach out to bridge the space that had formed in her mind during his absence, but words eluded her. Instead, she allowed herself to simply listen, to absorb the emotion that radiated from him, knowing that it carried all the love and concern he had always held for her. "I missed you," she finally whispered, the words fragile but filled with meaning. "More than I realized I could." Her gaze dropped to her hands, entwined nervously in her lap. The honesty of her confession felt like a release, a quiet unveiling of a truth that had been locked away. Daniel reached out, covering her hands with his. "I missed you too," he said, voice low and steady. "More than I knew I would. Being away, it showed me the small things I never paid enough attention to, the way you smile when you're focused, the way you hum when you're making tea, the way our quiet moments feel complete. I didn't realize how much I relied on those moments until I wasn't there." Emma looked up, meeting his gaze. There was a tenderness there that spoke of years of shared memories, of moments of joy and sorrow, of patience and understanding. She felt a tear slip down her cheek, not of sadness, but of profound relief. They were together again, yet the depth of the emotions neither had fully expressed before this moment added a richness to their connection that felt almost sacred. For a few minutes, they simply sat in silence, allowing their unspoken truths to hang in the air. shared without the need for more words. Emma realized that love wasn't just in what was said, was in the spaces between words, in the quiet acknowledgement of longing, care, and mutual understanding. Do you ever feel? Emma began hesitantly, then paused. How could she express the subtle fears, the quiet hesitation that sometimes shadowed her happiness? Do you ever feel like we hold back because we're afraid of changing what we already have? Daniel's eyes softened. Sometimes, he admitted, but I think that's normal. We love each other so much that the thought of losing even a moment of connection scares us. But I also know that the things we haven't said, the emotions we haven't expressed, are part of what makes this love real. We don't have to say everything at once, we just live it moment by moment. Emma nodded slowly, feeling the weight of his words sink into her heart. It was true. Their love wasn't about perfection or constant declarations. It was about presence, patience, and the courage to feel deeply. Even when emotions were complicated or unspoken, as the evening shadows grew longer and the soft glow of the lamps illuminated the room, Emma leaned slightly closer to Daniel. Their fingers brushed N. The house was quiet again, but this time it was different. The kind of quiet that doesn't weigh on the heart, but holds space for something important to be said. Emma and Daniel had spent the morning in their usual routines, tea, light cleaning. A walk in the garden, but the underlying tension of unspoken feelings still lingered. Like a gentle storm waiting to break, Emma found herself standing by the window, watching the sunlight filter through the trees. She had been replaying their conversations in her mind, the things said and unsaid over the past days. The memories of the week alone had settled in her heart, each one a small reminder of what she truly valued, what she had missed, and what she could no longer keep quiet. Daniel appeared in the doorway, carrying a small stack of paperwork, notes, invoices, letters that his eyes held a seriousness she hadn't seen in him before. He set the papers on the kitchen counter and leaned against it, watching her with a steady gaze. Emma, he began softly, I've been holding something inside, and I think it's time I finally say it. Emma's chest tightened. She had sensed this moment coming, though she didn't know what words would finally come. She turned to face him, her hands gripping the windowsill, her heart fluttering in anticipation. I know we've always tried to keep things simple. To cherish the quiet moments, Daniel continued, his voice low and deliberate. But I realize now that in trying to protect those moments, I haven't always been honest about how deeply I feel. I've been holding back out of fear. Fear that I might overwhelm you, or that I might somehow break what we already have. Emma felt a lump form in her throat. She had always known Daniel's love was quiet, steady, and unwavering but hearing. Him admit the weight of unspoken emotions made her heart ache with both relief and longing. You don't have to be afraid anymore, Emma whispered, stepping closer. I feel the same way. I've held back too, thinking I had to manage my feelings, that expressing them might change everything between us. But these past days, being alone, it showed me that I can't keep it inside anymore. Daniel's eyes softened, a mixture of relief and tenderness crossing his face. Emma, I love you, he said, the words deliberate and full of emotion. Not just for the big moments, not just for the laughter and shared adventures, but for every quiet, ordinary thing we do together. I love how you care for the smallest details, how you see the world, how you make our home feel like home. And I've been afraid that I don't say it enough, that I don't show it in every way I should. Tears gathered in Emma's eyes, a mixture of joy and the release of emotions she had kept bottled up. Daniel, I love you too, she said, her voice trembling. I've realized that love isn't just about words, it's about sharing life, trusting each other and being there even when it's difficult. But I also know that holding back only makes the heart ache more. Daniel took a step closer, his hand reaching for hers. I don't want either of us to hold back anymore, he said, his voice firm yet gentle. I want us to be honest with each other about everything. The little joys, the fears, the longings, we can face it all together. Emma nodded, feeling the weight of the week lift from her shoulders. She thought of the moments she had spent alone, the memories of their past. the longing she had felt, and realized that every emotion had led them to this point. The turning point where silence had to end, where truth had to be spoken, and where love could finally breathe freely. They sat together on the couch, hands entwined, letting the words settle around them. For the first time in days, there were no hesitations, no shadows of doubt, only the clarity of shared truth and the warmth of mutual understanding. Emma looked up at Daniel, her heart full. "I've missed so much just holding back," she admitted. "I didn't realize how much it hurt me until I let myself feel it fully. And now I don't want to ever hold back again." Daniel's gaze softened, his thumb brushing lightly over her hand. "Neither do I," he said. "We've spent so long understanding each other without words. But I think we're stronger when we let ourselves be open, when we allow our feelings to surface, even the ones we've been afraid to admit." The sunlight streamed through the window, highlighting the gentle expressions on their faces. Outside, the garden glistened with dew, and the world seemed to pause, holding its breath as if honoring the moment. It was a turning point, not just for that day, but for the way they would move forward, more open, more honest, and more connected than ever. Emma rested her head lightly against Daniel's shoulder, feeling a quiet joy that had been missing for days. The fear, the longing, the hesitation, they were gone, replaced by the courage to be fully present with each other. The week of separation had been challenging, but it had revealed something essential: the depth of their love, the strength of their bond, and the power of speaking the truth when it mattered most. And in that living room, filled with the soft glow of evening light, Emma and Daniel sat together, hearts aligned, emotions laid bare, ready to face the future with honesty, trust, and an unwavering love that had been tested and proven stronger than ever. The house was quiet, but not in the heavy, lonely way it had felt before. The stillness now carried warmth, comfort, and a sense of completeness. Emma and Daniel sat side by side on the couch, their fingers intertwined, sharing the kind of silence that speaks volumes, a silence filled with understanding, trust, and love. Outside, the sky was painted in soft hues of pink and gold as the sun dipped below the horizon. The rain from earlier had left the garden sparkling, droplets clinging to leaves and flowers, reflecting the light in tiny, radiant patterns. Emma glanced at the potted flower Daniel had brought when he returned. Its delicate blooms seemed to mirror the quiet renewal that had taken place in their hearts over the past week. "Do you remember the first time we planted flowers in the garden?" Emma asked, a soft smile playing on her lips. Daniel chuckled, a gentle, warm sound that made her heart flutter. "How could I forget? We were hopelessly clumsy, but somehow the flowers survived. Just like us." Emma laughed softly, feeling a deep sense of joy and relief. They had been through so much already: little separations, moments of doubt, unspoken emotions, and yet here they were, stronger, closer, and more aware of the depth of their love than ever before. The challenges had not weakened them. They had illuminated the foundation they had built together. For a moment, they simply sat, holding hands, letting the quiet fill them with peace. Emma realized that love, in its purest form, wasn't about grand gestures or perfect timing. It was about presence, honesty, and the courage to face both distance and vulnerability with an open heart. "I think I understand now," Emma said softly, leaning her head slightly against Daniel's shoulder. The week apart, it wasn't just about missing each other. It was about realizing how much we value these moments, every small part of our life together. Every laugh, every shared cup of tea, every quiet evening, it all matters more than I ever noticed before. Daniel nodded, his eyes warm and steady. "I felt the same way. Being away made me see the little things I take for granted. And I realized something important. I don't want to ever hold back from expressing how much you mean to me. Life is too short for that, and our love is too strong." Emma's heart swelled with emotion. She felt a quiet gratitude for the week they had endured apart, for the small twists of fate that had reminded them of their bond, and for the courage they both had shown in finally speaking their truths. Love, she realized, was not always easy, but it was always worth it. They rose together, moving toward the garden, their hands still intertwined. The evening air was cool and fragrant, carrying the scent of wet earth and fresh blooms. Emma felt the soft glow of sunlight on her face, and for a moment she closed her eyes. Letting the calm of the evening wash over her. Daniel gently squeezed her hand. "Do you want to plant another flower?" he asked, holding up a small pot. "For the garden and for us." Emma smiled, nodding. "Yes, let's make it a reminder of patience, of love, and of being together through everything." They worked side by side, laughter and gentle conversation filling the garden. The simple act of planting, a gesture so ordinary yet so full of meaning, symbolized the renewed strength of their bond. Each careful placement of soil and flower mirrored the care they promised to take with their hearts as the sun finally disappeared beyond the horizon. Leaving a soft twilight glow, Emma and Daniel stood back and admired the small garden they had nurtured together. It wasn't perfect. A few flowers leaned slightly, and some soil had spilled onto the pathway. But it was theirs, a reflection of their shared life, and perfect, real, and beautiful. Emma turned to Daniel, her eyes reflecting the soft colors of the evening sky. "I think this week taught us something important," she said, her voice steady and warm. "Love is about being present, about honesty, and about holding on even when we feel unsure. But it's also about trusting that, in the end, we'll find our way back to each other." Daniel smiled, pulling her gently into an embrace. "Exactly. And I promise, no matter what happens, I'll always come back to you. Because this is worth everything." For the first time in days, Emma felt a complete sense of peace. The loneliness that had once pressed against her chest was gone, replaced by quiet contentment and a profound appreciation for the life they shared. The week apart had been a test, but it had shown them the resilience, day